Thanks for joining us for the September edition of the Lee Schools TV podcast. I'm Rob Spicker, Director of the Communications Department at the school district, and your host for our conversation today. We're going to be focusing in on attendance. Missing school is missing an opportunity to learn. And all September, the school district is going to be focused on making sure that your child is at school every single day that's possible. We know every day in class is a step forward towards success. Our guest is going to be Paul Milford. He's a coordinator in the school social work services. Paul, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Just a real general question, but and very simply, it's so easy to say, but why is attendance so important?
Well, what we know is that attendance and academic success really go hand in hand. So it's hard to have one without the other. And, when our students are present, we know that they're engaged and they're learning. And the research really tells us the same thing. So when we dig into the research, what we know is that when students are chronically absent, there's all sorts of different things that they're missing out on school. And things like reading proficiency, grades, math proficiency, and ultimately high school graduation have all been tied in the research to whether or not a student has good attendance in school.
It's kind of amazing. If 10 days can reduce the opportunity, the chance to go to college by 25%,
Yeah.
That's a crazy statistics. So why does such a small number have such a big impact?
Yeah, it's crazy to think, right? So, I kind of like to think of attendance as, every day that a student attends is like a page in a book. So a student's academic career is ultimately a novel, right? It tells their story. So every day of school that they miss is like a page missing from that book. And when you think about over the course of a child's academic career, if they're missing 10 days of school every single year, it might not seem like much at the time, but by the time that student gets to 12th grade, they will have missed over 3/4 of an entire school year. So when you think kind of in that book analogy, that's a lot of pages missing. And so while one or two pages here or there might not inhibit you from enjoying the whole story, when there's pages missing out of every chapter or a whole chapter missing, it's going to make it really hard to stay engaged in that book.
You can't follow the pieces.
You can't follow
that
it.
much is missing.
Right.
You don't know the plot anymore about what happened. So let's start early, day one, kindergarten, and being there so important for a kindergartner. Can you share examples of why starting these patterns early matter?
Yeah, so kindergarten is really the foundation for a child's school career. So when you think about kindergarten, students are learning foundational skills that carry them through every single academic year beyond that. So when students start missing in kindergarten, they're missing key instruction that's really going to help drive their success in all the future years. So, when you don't have that solid foundation for their learning to be built upon, they're going to struggle in future years beyond that.
But the study shows about 17% of chronologically absent kindergartners don't read proficiently by third grade, right? So that really drives home the point about why being there is so important.
Yes, 17%. That's a shocking statistic. But when you think about it, it really does make sense. Because if students are learning, how to sound out letters, for example, and they're missing that instruction in kindergarten, that has a direct impact on how proficiently they're going to be able to read by third grade. And so what that tells us is we have to make sure we're setting those students up from success from day one. We're helping them learn those strong attendance habits so that they learn from the very first day of school that attending school is an important part of their success, and it becomes their routine.
It just becomes what you're used to, what's expected, and you practice like you preach. By sixth grade, if they're chronically absent, that's a leading indicator of dropping out, correct?
Yes, it is.
So what does that tell us about that importance then by like middle school, making sure you're there?
Yeah, so in middle school too, things kind of shift in middle school where students become much more preoccupied with those social connections. So much of middle school is kind of centered around the social life of the student. So when students are missing, they're missing out on those important opportunities to build friendships, to build that social connection that drives so much of that developmental stage for students. And what we see is that it's kind of like a snowball effect. So kids kind of need that to stay engaged in school, but then when they start missing, they're missing out on that engagement piece, and it makes them not want to attend school even more. So what I tell parents is it's important to get your kid involved. If there's an after-school activity, a club, a sport, a musical instrument, an arts program, something that keeps them engaged in the school can make a night and day difference for so many of our kids in middle school. And I've seen it work. So I tend to recommend that to parents because keeping those connections alive is so important for our students, especially in middle school.
The athletics comes to mind because you have to be there if you want to play, and
Right.
those clubs do the same kind of thing. So that's why it's so important. If you're involved, you got to be at school to do the things you really want to do.
Exactly.
You got to have that connection. In high school, you're looking at about 2.5 times better chance of graduating with regular attendance. So we really want to see our kids there. And what can families, what can the schools do to really make sure that students are staying on track once they get to high school?
Yeah, well, the pressure's really on in high school, right? So we are amping up that curriculum. They have a lot of responsibility on their plate in high school. And so one of the things that I have found works really well for students in high school is we have to help them see beyond high school at that point. We have to help them dream into the future. So whether that's, they're going into a career, technical college, whatever that looks like for them, when we can help have conversations with the students about connecting the dots between today, attending school today, putting the work in today, and where they're going, and aligning that action with those goals that they have for themselves, really does help students start to see the value in getting to that finish line in high school. And so I think as parents, as community members, as school staff, having those conversations with students and using that language about what are your goals? How do we help you dive into what those goals look like for you and tying them to attending school today? It makes all the difference for students.
Yeah, there isn't a job that you can just not show up and keep
That's
that job.
correct. Yeah.
So you got to set those patterns
We're-
early.
We're teaching those good habits.
A lot of parents misunderstand or don't realize how much their students are missing. Why do we think
Right.
that is? That as you go back to your analogy about the book, they don't really realize how many pages are missing.
Yep. Well, I think parents are busy, right? Everyone has so much on their plates. And I think, it's easy when you're just thinking, oh, it's just one day here, it's a day here. Well, by the end of the school year, 2 days a month is adding up to almost a whole month of school that student's missed, 20 days of school. So that's a lot. It sneaks up on you fast if you're not watching it. So one of the things that I always like to tell parents is, we have 365 days in a school year. 180 of those are school days. So about half of the year. So there's a lot of days in there that families can do vacations and, all the other amazing things that families get to do. We want to help protect those 180 days whenever we can. So, things like looking at the instructional calendar, having that at the ready, kind of helps families plan around the school breaks, the holiday breaks, things like that, so that they're planning doctor's appointments outside of school or they're planning trips outside of school whenever possible. And those kinds of things, I think, help families kind of keep track of where their students are at with attendance. Really, the other big thing that every parent should be on is the parent portal in Focus. You can look at your child's attendance in real time. You could see if they showed up to school that day. You could see how many absences they have, whether they're excused, unexcused. It is a very valuable tool for our families to kind of keep track of those absences so they don't sneak up on you.
Yeah, beyond the portal, you mentioned that, the calendar, other tips or tricks you might say to mom and dad, like, do this, it will help you keep track?
Yeah, I think having conversations with your student about their attendance is important. Look at the parent portal together. If you don't have a parent portal account, maybe you're not tech savvy and that's just not a good fit for you, have your child pull up their Focus account. They could show you their attendance. But sitting even once or twice a month as a family and looking at these things in Focus can really make a big difference for not just keeping track of attendance, but reinforcing that attendance is important for your student success.
Florida law requires daily attendance unless it's excused, an excused absence. So what does that term actually mean? What is an excused absence?
Right. So the law really has kind of 4 categories of an excused absence. The first one, which is the most common, is the student is too sick or possibly has an injury that prevents them from physically attending school. The second category would be if the student has a health-related appointment, dentist appointment, therapy appointment, something along those lines. The third would be like a death in the immediate family. And then the fourth would be an observance of a religious holiday for the family. So in any of those cases, it's really important for the family to make sure the school's getting documentation. So maybe a doctor's note, a parent note, some kind of documentation that's making its way to either the front office of the school or the parent is uploading it directly into the Focus Parent Portal, so we could change those unexcused absences over to excused. That's really the key there.
And the district tries to be proactive and reach out to parents where students are being absent. So what is our process? When are we jumping in? What are we getting involved? And what are we doing to encourage those kids to be in school?
Yeah. So, I mean, our goal is always to support families in this work. We know parents have a very big job raising children. And so we want to partner with them to make sure we are supporting whatever their needs are in regards to getting their students to school every day. So what will happen is typically if a student hits kind of this new threshold under Florida law, which is 5 unexcused absences in a 30-day or 10 unexcused absences in a 90-day, that kind of triggers the school team to say, hey, wait a minute, do we need to reach out to this family? Do we need to see what's going on here? The first contact might come from the school social worker or another member at the school team, just kind of reaching out to say, hey, you know, we noticed that Johnny's been missing quite a few days of school in the last month. Is there anything going on that we can help support? So we're really trying to engage families to problem solve as early as possible to get that student back on the right track or keep them on the right track. So that's kind of our first line. Now, if we notice that the attendance is kind of continuing, what the law requires is that we have a conference with the parent. So again, this is a problem-solving conference. It's our chance to really connect with the family. It's not a punitive conference. So we're going to send an invitation letter to the parent. They could attend that meeting in person, by phone, virtually, whatever works for their schedule, because we really want to find out from them, what barriers are you facing? What is keeping your child from getting to school every day? And we have resources that are school-based as well as community-based that we can help link families to make sure that they have whatever they need to get that student to school every day.
So early in the process, really focused on problem solving.
Absolutely.
How do we help you get your child to school?
Yep.
There does come a point, though, when there can be some consequences. So go into what happens. There's some legal consequences and things like that. So what happens if the problem solving doesn't work?
Yeah, so we are always going to be focused on problem solving, but the Florida law does require that when students continue to accumulate unexcused absences after those kind of early intervention attempts, there are steps that schools have to take to try to mitigate future absences. So if a student hits 15 unexcused absences in a 90-day period, they are now defined by Florida law as truant. So that's what we really want to prevent from happening. Now, if that happens, we're going to continue supporting those families. We're going to continue reaching out. We're going to continue trying to problem solve. But there does come a point where if the students continue to accumulate those absences and they're not responding to all of those early intervention attempts, schools are required to refer students for legal intervention through the court system. So obviously we want to avoid that ever happening for our families because we know they already have so much on their plates. But if it does get to that point, that is a requirement that schools have to follow.
I imagine there's probably a real recommendation if you were to speak to parents right now about being proactive.
Correct.
But you might recognize that this is an issue, whether it's your transportation, your work situation, and come forward now and say, help me. What that would be advised, right?
Right, absolutely. There's no embarrassment or shame in reaching out for help. We have people at our schools whose job it is to help support parents in this work. And we truly want to partner with them because we're all working towards the same goal. Our goal is to help each and every student reach their highest potential. And that's every parent's goal for their child too. So we want to partner with them in that. And they are always welcome to reach out to our schools and say, hey, listen, I'm going through a rough patch right now. I kind of need some help, some guidance. You know, can you connect me with the resources that are available? And we're glad to do that. So, you know, I would always encourage parents, please, if you're getting the phone calls from the schools about your child's attendance, don't ignore them. Mm-hmm. We're really trying to engage with you and problem solve so we can avoid ever getting to the legal piece down the road.
Yeah, our goal this month with an attendance campaign all September is to reverse that trend, to get those students to school. So last thoughts, last piece of advice to parents that you would leave them with.
Yeah, I mean, I think if parents just take away from this campaign that every single day of school matters, every single day of school is important to their child's education, then I think the campaign is a success, because ultimately at the end, we want these students to be successful. We know the data tells us that being in school sets them up for the strongest academic future that they can have. And so, just knowing that each and every day matters is important, but also knowing that they're not alone in that. So if they're struggling with barriers that are preventing them from getting their student to school, we have resources to support. So please reach out. We're happy to help.
Attendance matters.
It does.
All right. Paul, thanks so much for sharing your expertise to us. So we really appreciate it. Thanks everybody else who's joined us. Maybe you've learned a thing or two along the way. We appreciate you being with us. We're back next month with another edition of the Lee Schools TV Podcast.